Hello, IB Bio students. All right, today we're going to continue with 9.4 and we are going to look at flowering and flower structure. So let's start with the essential understanding that flowering involves a change in gene expression in the shoot apex. So let's remember what the shoot apex was. It was the very tip of a plant. So if this plant here is growing, the shoot apex would be this very top part of the plant that contains meristem, or tissue that has yet to differentiate. So flowers are the reproductive organs of angiosperms. So it's within the flowers that reproduction happens, sexual reproduction happens. And the flowers develop from the shoot apex because it's in the shoot apex where we have the meristem tissue. Now, the changes in gene expression that trigger the enlargement of the shoot apical meristem and actually start the differentiation of the tissue so that the flower can form is controlled by gene expression. So these genes need to be activated. If not, the flower will not form. So the activation of the genes are influenced by abiotic factors. And we know that flowers bloom in the spring. So we know that these abiotic factors that activate the gene for flowering are linked to the seasons. So if we think as to why that happens, then we have to think that pollinators are more abundant in the spring because the weather changes. And if the weather changes, that means it's starting to become warmer and we're starting to see more light, which means that the day is getting a little bit longer. So flowering plants typically will bloom when there is a suitable pollinator and where these pollinators are more abundant, and when there is a change in day and night length, that also triggers this change in gene expression. And this is what we are going to study later on, and this is called photoperiodism, and that's that section right there. Okay, this video is a really nice video. It shows how it shows the flower development through a scanning electron micrograph, and it's a time course. And I'm just going to let it play here, and you're going to see how you're able to see this almond floral organogenesis, or the formation of the flower, or the organs within the flower. Okay, so you're able to see here the beginning of what will later develop into the stamen, which is the male reproductive part of the flower, the carpel, the female reproductive part, the petal, and the sepals. So now let's look at the actual structure of the flower. And you probably remember this from 9th grade when you studied the parts of the flower and when you dissected a flower. So the skill, it's actual skill here, you have to be able to draw half views of animal pollinated flowers. And in the activity that you'll be working on, you'll get a chance to draw these. So again, the flowers are the reproductive organs of angiosperms, or the flowering plant, and they contain both the male and the female structures. So that's a term known as monoecious, because they have both male and female parts, but some may only possess only one structure, and that's called dioecious. So let's look at the structure of the flower. So you can always practice by clicking on the image and it hides the labels. So let's start with the male parts, and the male parts right here, it's the anther. And the anther is made up of the anther contains the pollen, which contains the sperm, and then the anther is held by the filament, okay, which is this tiny little stick. And then we have the female parts, and the female parts involves different structures. So we have the stigma, which is this part right here, is that sticky part where the pollen will actually land. And then we have the style, which is this sort of like tube. So once the pollen lands here, the pollen will break apart, release the sperm, and then the sperm will form, or actually with the help of pollen cells, it'll form this pollen tube, and then the sperm will travel down to the ovary, which is this whole part right here. And inside the ovary, you have the ovule, which is the egg, and the sperm will fertilize the egg. And then we have the sepal, which is what protects the flower when it's in a bud. And then we have the peduncle, and the peduncle is what holds the flower together. If you need to go and look at the different definitions of the different flower structures, they're down here. And just as a reminder, the male anther and filament collectively they have a name, and that's called the stamen. And the female parts, the stigma, the style, and the ovule, that's the female parts, and collectively they're called the carpel, or the pistil. Okay, and that's it. Here's also a simplified flower drawing, and it shows the male and the female parts of the flower.